Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, and I need you to stop whatever you are doing right now because what I am about to tell you is something that has been quietly circulating in the background of everything that happened on the night of March 21st, 2026, and most people have been so caught up in celebrating the concert that they have not stopped to ask a very important question. What actually happened before BTS took that stage at Gwanghwamun Square? Because the story that the cameras showed you, the lights, the crowd, the music, the emotion, that was the finished product. That was the result. But what was happening in the hours and days leading up to that moment is a story that is far more complicated, far more human, and in many ways far more powerful than the concert itself. And at the center of that story, as he almost always is, was Jungkook. So let's talk about it. First, I want you to understand the weight of what this night actually was. Not just symbolically, not just culturally, but in terms of the sheer physical and logistical reality of what was being attempted. On March 21st at 8 p.m., BTS held their comeback live, Arirang at Gwanghwamun Square, marking the first time a single artist had ever held a solo concert at that historic location. Read that again. The first time ever. In the entire history of that space, which has been used for national mourning, political protests, and public celebrations for decades, BTS were the first artists to ever perform there in a solo concert context. That is not a small thing. That is an enormous thing. And every single member of BTS, Jungkook included, understood exactly what they were walking into that night. The backdrop of the Itaewon disaster in 2022, which killed nearly 160 people in a crowd crush, had a massive impact on how Korean authorities approached crowd management for this event. Safety preparations were described as thorough and intensive, with analysts saying the BTS Gwanghwamun performance was held under the most stringent preparation measures possible. This means that in the weeks leading up to the concert, the production team, Big Hit Music, Netflix, the Seoul Metropolitan Government, and Korean police were all in constant communication about contingency plans, crowd control, emergency protocols, and worst-case scenarios. The logistics were mind-bending in their complexity. And all of that pressure, the safety concerns, the historical significance, the sheer scale, was pressing down on every person involved, including the 7 men who were going to have to walk out and perform in front of it all. Now here is where Jungkook's story specifically begins. Because you have to understand that March 2026 was not a straightforward month for him. Just weeks before the concert, on February 26th, Jungkook had gone live on Weverse late at night in a session that became one of the most talked about moments in K-pop so far this year. He was candid, unfiltered, and clearly carrying something heavy. He spoke about frustrations with the system around him. He made personal admissions that surprised a lot of people. And then, almost immediately after, he posted a selfie with a promise that he would work very hard, that the album was coming, that fans should wait just a little longer. That sequence of events, from the raw emotional livestream to the quiet public promise, told a story about someone who was going through a genuine internal reckoning in the weeks leading up to the biggest performance of his career. And then the album dropped on March 20th, the day before the concert. One day. 24 hours between the release of their first full group album in nearly 4 years and the first live performance of those songs in front of hundreds of thousands of people. In a livestream back in December 2025, Jungkook had shared that they would only begin learning the choreography on December 19th, just months before the concert. Which means the rehearsal timeline for this performance was compressed, intense, and happening simultaneously with the final stages of album production. These were not songs they had been performing for years with the muscle memory locked in. These were brand new songs, brand new choreography, being debuted live in the most high-pressure environment imaginable. On the night of the concert, the temperature in Seoul was around 9 degrees Celsius, and the weather conditions at Gwanghwamun Square were described as cold, with significant wind. Now, if you are a performer, you know what cold and wind do to a voice. They tighten everything. They make breath control harder. They affect the ability to sustain notes and execute the kind of precise, controlled vocal runs that Jungkook is known for. And performing in those conditions, outdoors, with 164 tons of production equipment surrounding you and Netflix broadcasting your every note to 190 countries in real time, that is not a comfortable situation for any singer, regardless of how talented they are. The environmental conditions alone were a genuine obstacle. Jungkook himself said after the performance, "I don't think I will ever forget tonight. I felt pressure and fear about the comeback, but standing here with you just feels amazing. Pressure and fear. Those are his words. Not nerves in the casual, performative sense that artists sometimes express before shows. Genuine pressure and genuine fear. And when you layer that admission on top of everything else we know about what was happening in his life and in the production of this concert in the weeks leading up to that night, those two words carry an enormous amount of weight. Here is what the people who were paying very close attention started piecing together in the days after the concert. The controversy that erupted around Jungkook's performance was not just about the performance itself. Allegations of lip-syncing emerged, with some viewers pointing out moments where Jungkook's mouth movements appeared slightly out of sync with the powerful high notes being heard over the speakers. Supporters were quick to defend him, citing the extreme environmental factors, the freezing March temperatures and high winds in Seoul, as likely necessitating a heavy live master track to ensure the broadcast's audio quality. Fans pointed out that Jungkook's mic was clearly on, as his heavy breathing and ad-libs were audible over the backtrack. But here is the thing that the debate about lip-syncing actually reveals, even if you do not take a side in that debate. It reveals that the technical conditions of that concert were genuinely difficult. That the production team was dealing with real challenges in how to balance live audio with broadcast quality in freezing outdoor conditions. And that Jungkook was performing in an environment where even the technical infrastructure around him was under enormous strain. The fact that the performance sounded as strong as it did, that fans around the world were moved to tears by his vocals, that Diplo had publicly praised his voice, that the global reaction was overwhelmingly one of all of that happened in conditions that were working against him at every level. Then there was the camera controversy. Online viewers began pointing out how Jungkook appeared on screen during key sections. During several vocal parts, the camera allegedly moved outward, showing the venue, the skyline, and the crowd, while close shots appeared limited. Because of that, the visual focus did not match the vocal delivery, and some viewers noted a disconnect between sound and screen. Fans started criticizing Netflix for allegedly sidelining the BTS magne. Now, whether this was a deliberate decision by the directors or simply the result of the logistical chaos of managing a broadcast of this scale, the effect was the same. Jungkook's biggest moments in the concert were, for many viewers watching at home, not fully captured on screen. And for a performer who prepares every facial expression, every gesture, every micro-movement with the precision that Jungkook does, that is deeply frustrating. It means that the thing he worked so hard to create did not fully translate to the audience that needed to see it most. The concert was directed by Hamish Hamilton, the man who directed the opening ceremony of the 2012 London Olympics and multiple Super Bowl halftime shows. This was a world-class production with one of the most experienced live event directors on the planet at the helm. And even with all of that expertise, the scale and complexity of what was happening at Gwangwon that night created gaps and imperfections that nobody could fully control. Jungkook performing at the center of that controlled chaos, knowing that hundreds of millions of people were watching, knowing that this was the most historically significant concert of his career, and doing all of that while carrying the weight of the February livestream and the tensions it represented. That is a picture of someone walking a tightrope in a hurricane. In between songs during the concert, Jungkook told the crowd, "Actually, there was a pressure to make a comeback, but I'm just happy to see you." And later, together with RM, he said, "You know that the seven of us are always on the same page, right? No matter what, we'll keep swimming together." There is something so specific about that phrasing, "no matter what." That is not a throwaway line. That is a statement that carries context, that carries history, that carries all of the difficult months and the difficult conversations and the difficult decisions that had to happen to get 7 people to that stage at the same time on that night. No matter what. We are here. We kept our promise. J-Hope, for his part, confessed his own honest feelings that night, saying he was worried about whether he could forget the gap after finishing his military service. Which tells you that the fear and uncertainty were not unique to Jungkook. Every member of BTS was carrying something into that concert. Every single one of them had spent years away from this, had rebuilt themselves as individual artists, had gone through the physical and psychological experience of military service, and was now being asked to step back into the version of themselves that had last been on stage together nearly 4 years ago. That is a profound ask. And the fear of not being able to meet that ask, of somehow falling short of the memory of what BTS was and the expectation of what BTS would be, that fear was real, and it was present in that dressing room before the show. Fortunately, the night ended without any major safety incidents. Seoul Mayor Oh Se-hoon had conducted on-site inspections days before, with preparations described as covering everything including anti-terrorism measures. The organizational machinery that had been built around this concert held. The safety protocols worked. The 200,000 people who filled the streets of Gwangwon and the surrounding areas went home without incident. And in the middle of all of that, the security checkpoints, the police cordons, the temperature monitoring, the crowd management protocols, BTS performed. And they were extraordinary. Netflix attracted 18.4 million viewers for the live broadcast, topping the weekly rankings in 80 countries and reaching number 1 in 24 countries. Those numbers tell you something about what the world saw that night. 18 million people watching live. Not on delay, not later, live, in the moment, at whatever ungodly hour their time zone demanded. People in Indonesia waking up at 5 a.m. People in Brazil staying up past midnight. People in the United States watching on their lunch break. All of them tuned in because they understood, on some level, that what was happening at Gwangwon Square was not just a concert. It was a moment. A threshold being crossed. And Jungkook was at the center of it. What I want you to take away from all of this is not drama, not controversy, not negativity. What I want you to take away is a deeper appreciation for what it actually means to be Jungkook in that moment. To have gone through everything that February brought. To have carried the weight of 4 years away from this. To have rehearsed new songs in compressed timelines while an album was still being finalized. To have walked out onto a stage in freezing wind in front of 250,000 people with 18 million more watching at home, on the most historically significant stage any Korean artist had ever stood on, and to have performed with the kind of emotional openness and technical precision that made the entire world stop and pay attention. That is not something that happens automatically. That is something that is chosen. Something that is fought for. Something that requires a person to look at everything they are carrying and decide that none of it is heavy enough to keep them off that stage. At the end of the night, Jungkook stood on that stage and said in English, "It was truly an honor to perform here in Gwangwon. I also thank ARMY." Simple words. Short words. But after everything that had happened to get to that moment, after all the pressure and fear he had admitted to carrying, those words were everything. He made it. They all made it. And the world was watching when they did. If this video gave you a new perspective on that night, please hit the like button because it genuinely helps more people find this channel. Subscribe if you are not already here, because with BTS on a world tour that covers 82 shows across 34 cities, we are going to have content like this for the next 12 months straight. Hit the bell so you never miss a thing. And drop a comment below knowing everything that was happening behind the scenes. Does the Gwangwon performance hit differently for you now? I want to hear your thoughts. I will see you in the next one.